Well, good morning. My name is Chad Melton. I'm the pastor of ministries here at Faith Bible Church, and we're excited to see everybody this morning. I guess you all made it on time. Set your clocks up forward, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you think you're at the early service, but this is the late one. So are you all with me? I know the extra hour of sleep, that's tough to lose. So are y'all with me? This is yes. The rest of y'all are already asleep. And so, hey, we're glad you're here. Glad to study the Bible together, worship together. And so over the last several weeks, we have been looking in our series, How to Make the Most of Your Life. And so what we've been looking at is what Jesus says. And ultimately what he's saying is you have to give it away. And Whitty and Jamie have been teaching us that we all have a list of things that I think will make the most of my life. And we've been looking at what Jesus says, and he's telling you, no, this is what my list should be about. And we're trying to get my list and the lists that God tells us through Scripture, we want them to match up. And so over the last several weeks, Whitty and Jamie have been challenging us. Hey, what adjustments do we need to make to our list so that I can make the most of my life? And so that's what we're looking at. We're going to continue today. And so back about 10 years ago, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. I was a student pastor in Lubbock, Texas, and I'd only been in ministry for a few years at this point. And so this was a friend of mine that went to church. He was about my age, and he was very successful already in the corporate world. And he made significantly more money than I did. And so we were talking, we were sitting there having lunch, and we're talking about life, about kids. By this point, I'd been married probably 4 years, and Lily was a little over a year old. And we were just talking about kids, our marriage, and finances. And he asked me a question that flipped my world upside down. He said, hey, Chad, when are you going to get a real job that you can provide for your family better? And I would love to say that just rolled off of me. But it didn't. And for 2 or 3 weeks, I remember thinking, maybe I should. Maybe I should get out of ministry where I can probably make a little bit more money and I can provide for my family in a better way. I could buy a bigger house. Our family was growing. And maybe I could get a bigger house. I could buy Jody a better car, a better vehicle that maybe we couldn't afford. By the way, she deserves it. I could buy me a new truck. I deserve it. I started looking at all these things. And I almost talked myself out of something that Jesus had talked me into years before. I started rearranging my list on what I thought would make the most of my life. And something that Jesus had talked to me years before, I almost talked myself out of it. Because of what Jamie talked about last week, sometimes my wants, they overwhelmed what Jesus is calling me to. I was trying to adjust my list for what I thought would make the most of my life. And I'm very thankful I didn't. Because I think about all the opportunities that I've had over the years, the people that I've gotten to invest in and do life with. And those opportunities that lead me to standing on the stage right here teaching the Bible. And I'm very thankful I didn't. But I started looking at my list and what do I need to adjust to make the most of my life? Have you ever had a moment in your life when you almost talked yourself out of something that could have made the most of your life? Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe you almost talked yourself out of going on that first date. I heard lots of stories like that. And now you've been married for 30 years and you can't imagine life without them. But you almost talked yourself out of going on that date. Or maybe it's kids. Maybe you grew up in a dysfunctional home and you're saying, I can't have kids. I can't bring somebody up the way I was. And you almost talked yourself out of having kids. And you can't imagine life without your kids now. Or maybe a few years ago, you stepped out and took a financial risk and started your own company. And you almost talked yourself out of it because you had a steady job. But you decided to take the risk, and now 7 years later, your company is thriving. Or maybe you actually have talked yourself out of things, and you missed opportunities. Maybe it's someone on the street corner. There's something inside of you that's saying, hey, I should help them. I should give them something. But you talk yourself out of it because, well, they should go get a job. Or maybe your marriage has been struggling for the last couple of years, and you need to get some help. But if you go get help, then people will know that you don't have it all together, and you've talked yourself out of it. The sad thing is, in my life, I probably have way more of these stories where I feel something inside of me says, I need to do this. But then I come up with a list of 100 things and say, well, no, I shouldn't do that today. So I talk myself out of it. And I wonder how many opportunities I have missed because I talked myself out of it. Do you keep talking yourself out of the things that would make the most of your life? If so, why do we do that? Today, we're going to look at a story of a guy named Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is kind of a big deal. He even has a song written about him. Many of you know it, and you're already singing it in your head because it stays there, and it won't go away. And so we pick up the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus in Luke 19. And what's happening right before that in Luke 18 is Jesus heals a blind guy, and then he's talking to his disciples. He's foretelling his death and resurrection. And he's heading to Jericho. We know these are actually the last few days of his life. And then he meets a guy named Zacchaeus. And we pick it up in verse 1. Luke 19:1. He entered Jericho, and he was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Now, whenever you look at rich in the Bible, what that means is he was rich. Obviously, he was wealthy enough to point out. That didn't happen a lot of times. So he was a very wealthy guy. And he's the chief tax collector. So therefore, he's in charge of the other tax collectors. And what would happen in those times, Rome, they needed their money. And so a wealthy person would pay Rome their money, the taxes that Rome is owed, and then he would be reimbursed by taking taxes from the people. But the tax collectors, so therefore he was over all the tax collectors. The tax collectors were known for ripping people off, for charging a crazy amount of taxes, more than what they needed, and stealing from the people, basically. And so being the chief tax collector, he was pretty unpopular with the people. He wasn't liked by his peers. He probably had the big house on the hill. He probably was wearing the new pair of Yeezys out there and had the Gucci bag. But he probably didn't have friends. He thought he had his list right because the world told him that having these things is what makes the most of your life. So we go on verse 3. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. So Zach had heard about Jesus. By this time, he had done a lot of miraculous things. Word was getting around about him, and Zach heard, hey, he's coming my way. I just want to check this guy out. This is a religious leader who hung out with people like me. I want to see this guy. And so there was something different about him. He even had a tax collector that run around with him. His name was Matthew. He even let that guy hang out with him. Zach wanted to see him. But there was a problem. He was vertically challenged. He was short. And whenever you're vertically challenged and there's a crowd, it's a struggle, and the struggle is real. And some of you know the struggle. But Zacchaeus wasn't a passive person. He was a problem solver. So he said, hey, there's a tree over there. I'm going to climb up in the tree just to catch a glimpse, just to see this guy that they're talking about named Jesus. So envision this. When you read the Bible, interact with it. Envision this, a rich guy, wealthy, powerful, authoritative guy, short, and he's climbing up into the tree. That's just funny to me. I literally started laughing when I'm reading this in the Bible. I'm envisioning this grown man climbing up in the tree, and especially in this culture, they didn't do that. You didn't do things that people would make fun of you for. But it gives us a little insight to the personality of Zacchaeus. It would have been really easy for Zach to talk himself out of what he was doing because of a life situation. He was short. It would have been really easy to say, hey, there's a crowd. I can move on. And we let life situations talk us out of making the most of our lives a lot of times. But Zach didn't talk himself out of it. He took the risk because he wanted to see Jesus. Verse 5. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down, and he received him joyfully. Now, how many of you have the song going in your head? Do y'all remember the song? Yes? Okay, so we're going to sing. Well, if you got it in your head, might as well sing it, right? That means y'all got to participate. Ready? Okay. Zacchaeus. Come on, a little louder. A wee little man and a wee little... Y'all got to do the motions. Sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And as the Savior passed that way, he looked up in the tree. Here we go. And he said, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm going to your house today. For I'm going to your house today. It's awesome to sing Zacchaeus in church. And so Jesus called Zacchaeus by name, which is unusual. The best we can tell, they've never met. But Jesus, multiple times throughout the Gospels, he seems to know who we are. He seems to know people, know what's going on in their heart. This almost seems like it was a divine plan that Jesus was to meet Zacchaeus. I love the way Jesus says, hey, Zacchaeus, I'm going to your house. I'm coming over today. You know, what if I were to do that today? What if I were to look at Lance and Ginger and say, hey, by the way, I'll be over like 2 o'clock today, okay? How would you respond? But Zach didn't. He just jumped down, and he gave no excuses. He's like, come on over. It says he received him joyfully. He's like, come over. Once again, it would have been really easy for Zach to talk himself out of this situation. But he decided to take the risk and invite Jesus over. And then come the complainers. Those are always there, it seems like. Luke 19:7, verse 7. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. Ooh, he has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. There's always people there griping about something. And the word sinner, it tells you what the people thought about Zacchaeus. This religious leader, he's going to have at that guy's house, he's going to stay there? Why would he even be hanging out with that person? How dare him? And what I love is that Jesus seems to be about messy people who don't have their list together. I thank God that he loves people like Zacchaeus and like me who don't have it all together. We're a little bit messy. So in verse 7, we see Jesus is going to Zach's house. And between 7 and 8, there seems to be a gap of time. What are they talking about? What's going on in that gap? I think there is a good chance that they would share a meal together. That was common then, and it's common now. Jesus was going over to his house. Jody and I, we enjoy having people over at our house, having people over for dinner. We enjoy sitting around our table, getting to know people and doing life with people, talking. And so, but what we do know is when people come over, especially when it's not planned, it's a lot of work. So imagine someone of importance, not me, but imagine someone of importance is coming over your house. And you aren't planned for it. So you go home and you got to run home after church, okay? Chad's coming over to the house today. And so we got to go home and we got to go buy T-bone steaks at the grocery store, okay? T-bones, okay? All right? Not sirloin, we like T-bone, okay? So you got to go buy the steaks and you got to rush home. And if your house is anything like mine, you might have to pick it up a little bit because it's kind of messy. And then you got to get home and you got to get all the stuff from the grocery store. Get home, you got to cut up the potatoes because mashed potatoes go really good with T-bones. And we like green beans. And you got to mix the salad. I'm dropping hints just in case y'all want to have me over sometime. And so it takes a lot of time. You got to prepare the chocolate chip cookies. You got to bake them. It takes a lot of time to have someone over your house that's unplanned. And that's today when we have grocery stores. We have vehicles that we can drive. Imagine this in the first century. It wasn't quite so easy. It probably took a little bit more time. They had to walk to the market. If they wanted meat, they might have even had to kill an animal and prepare it. There was probably a gap of time between verses 7 and 8. It's reasonable that there might have been hours. So what do you think was happening in the gap of time? Now, this is not in the Bible. This is out of the book of Chad, so take that for what it's worth. Not much. But I do think it's relevant and it's probable about what happened during this time. We know what Jesus talked about with others. So I think it's reasonable to think that he had some of the same conversations with Zacchaeus. I can imagine Jesus talking about life, his mission, his purpose, why he's at his house, about how Zach can make the most of his life. I think it was things maybe like on the Sermon of the Mount. Hey, Zach, man, you've been laying up treasures here on earth. You need to be laying up treasures in heaven. Think bigger. I can imagine Matthew might be there. Matthew saying, hey, Zach, I was a tax collector. I gave up everything to follow Jesus. Man, it's worth it. I can imagine Matthew encouraging him. And Jesus might be saying, hey, Zach, you've been so anxious about your life. Don't be anxious about your life. You see how God's taking care of the birds in the air? How much more does he love you? And he'll take care of you. If you want to make the most of your life, you must lose it. And whoever loses it for the sake of Jesus will find it. I have this feeling that Zacchaeus might have looked at Jesus and said, hey, tell me the story about when you ran all those religious people out of the temple. Jesus, that was pretty cool. When you flipped over the tables and you cracked the whips and you got them out. I can imagine Zach wanting to hear that because that relates to him. And Jesus might be kind of chuckling and say, no, Zach, you missed it. They were making a mockery of my Father's house. Maybe these conversations took place. Maybe we have the luxury to know that Jesus' time on earth was coming to an end. In Luke 18, we see that he's talking to his disciples about his death. I can imagine he talks to Zach and says, hey, Zach, I'm about to physically give my life away. But watch me rise. I don't know what took place during this time. These are conversations that he had with other people. So it makes sense that he talks with Zach about the same things. We don't know, not sure, but there was probably a gap of several hours maybe of uninterrupted time with Jesus that radically changed Zacchaeus. So in verse 7, we see that he goes to the house. And then in verse 8, once again, there seems to be a gap. Here's what Zacchaeus says. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he is also a son of Abraham. So this encounter with Jesus changed Zach's life. Jesus said salvation has come to him that day. And it is possible that Zach believed in Jesus as a Savior of the world for the first time. But clearly more than that happened. The word for salvation is soteria. And it's what our series is based on. And there are 5 different uses for the word saved in the New Testament. And based on what he says in verse 8, soteria in verse 9 is Jesus' language for make the most of your life. So Zach calls him Lord. He acknowledges who Jesus is, the Son of God. And he said, I've had my list all wrong. I've been consumed with making money. I've been consumed with power. So now I've met Jesus. I'm giving half of my money away. And if I defrauded anyone, I'm going to pay it back fourfold. So after spending time with Jesus, he realized there's a better way to live. And that's to give my life away. He got clarity about the way money and greed had created issues in his life. The pursuit of money, the pursuit of power had his list all out of order. And he realized that being wealthy doesn't equal making the most of your life. And then Jesus then affirmed what happened in Zach's life by making a statement in verse 10, a very well-known verse. It says, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. The word for, it's explanatory. It's telling us what Jesus is all about. And this word saved here encompasses all 5 uses of this word. That who Jesus is and what he came for. He came to make a way for us to get to God. He came to heal the sick. He came to show us how to make the most of our life. Jesus wanted Zach to understand who he was. And he wanted Zach to understand how he could use his position by using his time, his energy, his resources to make the most of his life. This is what Jesus was and is all about. He came to seek and save the lost. And then in the next several verses, you can read, to reiterate the point, Jesus tells a story, a parable about money. And he says the king is going away to prepare for a new kingdom. And he gave 10 servants a significant amount of money, 10 minas. It's a lot of money. And he expected them to invest it. And then the story, Jesus is telling them, he specifically looks at 3 workers. 2 of the 3 workers, they took the money that the king gave them and they invested it and made more money. And the king comes back and says, you've done a good job. He says they were rewarded based on what they did with the money. Then the third one, the third worker, he did nothing with it. He reacts out of fear. He was worried he would lose it. He was unwilling to take the risk. And so he did nothing with the money. And the king comes back and the master was not pleased and takes the money away from him and gives it to the other worker who wasn't scared to take the risk. So he's reiterating the point of what happened with Zacchaeus. Zach had been given a lot. He had money. He had power, he had authority, but had his list out of order. But after meeting Jesus, he knew he needed to make some adjustments to his list. He said, if I had wronged anyone, which probably indicates that he did, he would pay back fourfold, well over what the Old Testament law required. He's going above and beyond. There's something radical that happened in him. He's doing something that sounds a little crazy to us, something risky. But you notice Jesus didn't talk him out of it. Jesus didn't go, hey, whoa, Zach, you don't need to repay four times. You just treat them better. He didn't do that. He doesn't say, hey, you don't need to give away half your stuff. Jesus doesn't talk him out of it. As a matter of fact, I think Jesus was probably talking him into it. Hey, Zach, you're starting to get it, man. You got to give it away. If you want to make the most of your life, you have to give it away. And we assume Zach is still a tax collector after this. We don't know. We don't hear any more about him. But I can imagine he's still a tax collector, but he changes the way he operates. I can imagine he's now an honest tax collector. He still charges interest, but it's an honest interest. I can imagine he goes to the other tax collectors and he said, hey, we're not doing this anymore. We're not ripping people off. Imagine how that would change the community. Zacchaeus met Jesus, and it changed his life. Think about all the risks that he took that day. He risked his reputation. You got this grown man who's short climbing a tree. People are going to make fun of him. He risked the reputation. You have this religious leader coming over. People are grumbling about him. They don't like this guy. Jesus is going to eat with a sinner. He's risking his reputation. He might be even risking his job. He definitely risked his finances. He has one conversation with Jesus and he says, I'm giving it away. I'm repaying the people I've wronged. He definitely risked his finances. He might even have risked his marriage. There's a good chance that he was married. We don't see in here that he goes and has this conversation with Mrs. Zacchaeus. We don't know. But he risked a lot that day. He had every reason to not take the risk and talk himself out of making the most of his life. But he met Jesus, and it didn't matter anymore. He knew his life was about Jesus from there on out. Let me ask you today, what risk is Jesus asking you to take so you can make the most of your life? Stop talking yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into. Stop talking yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into. So what is Jesus talking you into about your money? Are you afraid of risk? You might be saying, well, Chad, this world is crazy right now. Our economy is crazy. Have you seen gas prices lately? There's a war going on in Ukraine. The stock market's unstable. I need to back off a little bit with my money. I need to start saving. I need to pull back, not give more. Let me ask, is your list out of order with your money? Don't talk yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into today. What is Jesus talking you into about your abilities? Maybe you're a great teacher. You've been sitting on the sidelines for years. Maybe you're great at working with kids. You love it with students. And you have 100 reasons why you can't serve anywhere. I'm too busy. I can't give up this time. I love this. I love my people, and I don't want to give that up so I can do this. It's a big commitment. Every week, Chad, every week. But no, Jesus is asking you to do something. Don't talk yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into today. What is Jesus talking you into about your time? This is our most valuable resource. In our list, are you out of order with your time? Maybe you need to be spending more time with your family and less at work. Maybe you need to give up Wednesday nights. So because your marriage is struggling and you know that you need some help with that. Once again, we can think of 100 reasons why I shouldn't do this. But what is Jesus asking you to do with your time? Don't talk yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into today. How are you investing your time, your abilities, and your money so you can make the most of your life? Don't talk yourself out of something that Jesus is talking you into today because you don't want to take the risk. Back several years ago, about 12, I was in Midland. I had just started in ministry. And there was this guy named John Whitty that was working with us. And John has been here teaching. And he took me through a process. At that time, he called it Journey Partnering Group, if I remember right. And it was a discipleship group that he took me and another guy through. I had to ask another guy to go with us. But one of the things he asked me to do during that time, he said, I need you to go ask some of your closest friends, the people that know you the best. Ask them what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. And I did that. I remember I talked to my brother and I talked to 3 of my best friends that know me well, that knew me well at that time, still to this day do. And I asked them, hey, what weaknesses do you see in me? And let me tell you, what I heard broke my heart. It changed me. All of them said, they had one common thing that they all said in their different words. But they said, Chad, one of the things that we see is a major weakness in you. They said, we believe that God has given you tremendous abilities and talents. And they said, but because the way your personality works, you are scared to take risks. They said, we think you've missed some incredible opportunities because you wouldn't step out and take risks because you're too comfortable. That's sad to me to think about how many opportunities have I missed because I was scared. Because I would talk myself out of doing something I felt like maybe Jesus was talking me into. And my best friends were saying, hey, this is something you need to work on. Stop talking yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into. What risk is Jesus asking you to take so you can make the most of your life? In the coming months, we have some big opportunities here at Faith Bible Church for you to take some risks with our leadership. You know, it'd be really easy for us. We meet with a staff every week, and it'd be really easy for us to say, hey, it's been a hard couple of years. We've gone through a lot of transition. It'd be really easy to talk ourselves out of doing stuff that we believe Jesus is talking us into. But we believe incredible things are happening here, and we have work to do. Lives are being changed by Jesus. Marriages are being strengthened. People with addictions are being helped. In the middle of some chaotic times, we are pushing forward with the things that we feel God is calling us to do. Several people have asked me over the last couple months, hey, are we pushing pause on the vision that we rolled out in August? Let me just tell you, I don't have a pause button. I only have gas, and I'm pushing down on the gas because we believe in what Jesus has called us to do. We're pushing forward. We're starting up new ministries, starting new small groups, and we need volunteers. We're not going to stop down because they're not there yet, because we believe this is what Jesus has called us to do, and we're not going to talk ourselves out of it. Over the last couple of months, our giving has been down. Financially, we've been down. We're not going to put everything on pause because we're scared to take a risk to do what we believe Jesus is causing us to do, what he's calling us to do. We're not going to stop down. We're going to keep moving forward. But we need our whole church moving together. We need you. Imagine with me, if we all gave our lives away the way Zacchaeus did. Imagine the impact Faith Bible Church will have in the coming years if we don't talk ourselves out of what Jesus is talking us into. What risk is Jesus asking you to take so you can make the most of your life?